My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This episode is brought to you by Microsoft Azure. Turn your ideas into reality with an Azure free account. Get everything you need to develop apps across cloud and hybrid environments, scale workloads, create cloud-connected mobile experiences, and so much more. Discover what you can create with popular services free for 12 months. Learn more at azure.com. That's AZURE.com. And sign up for a free account to start building in the cloud today.
Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why someone would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call it your capital S story. In each episode, we feature guests who have great insights on business storytelling, who can share their experiences and key learnings to help you and your business do a better job of sharing your capital S story to deliver remarkable business results. Today, we're honored to have Ben Christensen as our guest. Ben is the CEO and co-founder of Cambium Carbon. He's also a graduate of the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Sciences. Ben, I didn't know there was such a school, and I'm quite impressed. I'm sure we'll talk about that too. Ben has spent practically his entire career thinking about wood and how to use it better. And that's what his company's all about. We're going to talk more about that today. I loved your bio on the company website, Ben, because you say that you've been thinking about wood and working with wood since you were a kid in rural New Mexico. And today, of course, you're in the Washington, D.C. area, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, great. Well, welcome to Storylines Live, Ben. I just touched briefly on your background. Feel free to add to anything I shared, mention anything I didn't.
Sure. Yeah, well, really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me on, Paul. And yeah, I mean, you touched on it. Our company is focused on saving wood to save the planet. So we're trying to build out new, very sustainable supply chains. I'm sure we'll get into what we actually do, but coming to this place where we are today took a lot of pieces, took a lot of different people, took a lot of luck, and excited to sort of connect some dots as we explore the story of how we got here.
Well, we're going to saw right into that, so to speak. Sorry. I'll tell you, my family can't stand to be around me, Ben, because I always win at Scrabble, being a former journalist, and too many
makes sense.
Puns, you know. And hey, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, you have a podcast. Would you please tell our listeners about your podcast? I find it fascinating.
Yeah. So we have a podcast called Between Two Slabs, which is focused on how do you actually understand wood? How do you think about using salvage material instead of virgin trees that comes from forests, and sort of the complexity and the joys of doing that? In many ways, using salvage material, we like to think about it as treasure hunting. You're looking for material in a waste stream that stands out, and you're trying to do that in a way that, you know, brings joy and brings the story of that material to the end customer. So that's what the podcast is on.
So it's a lot about wood, folks, but it's really very interesting. I saw that title Between Two Slabs, and I thought, well, this could be a lot of things, but it was really very interesting. And one of the things I like about your podcast is your hosts. They're folks who work in the business and literally are hands-on and working with wood. Can you give our listeners a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we are focused on saving wood to save the planet, and we do that by connecting all of these local salvage shops. So think about people who are taking a log that would have otherwise been wasted, turned into something like a mulch or burned or sent to landfill, and instead they're saving it and turning it into boards that then ultimately become furniture or part of our buildings. And all those people are really unique. This is something that's really true in the wood industry. A lot of characters, and we certainly have our own cast of characters on our team, really led by Paul and John, tons and tons of experience in the wood space. Absolutely brilliant, phenomenal to work with. They know anything and everything about wood, and they are not hesitant to tell you every story that they've learned along the way about it. And it's been great to see both the sort of growth of that story and also to see their relationship really play out in a conversational way on the podcast. And yeah, we're just really excited about where it's at.
I think one of the other things that's cool, you just said where it's at, and where it's at is in your shop, right? I mean, you're not in some fancy recording studio. The guys are pulling up a chair and sitting down, and there's slabs of wood behind them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we often over-index for getting all of the show behind something right, and we under-index from focusing on what it's about. And for us, this is about a conversation with folks who really understand the industry, and where a better place to do that than in the shop.
There you go. I love that. And folks, we'll put links to the Cambium podcast in the show notes. So please look for that. Ben, when we have guests on Storylines Live, we always ask them about this concept of the capital S story, which is obviously so important to us that we do an entire podcast about it. And we ask them which of the four critical questions that a capital S story answers that are really important to them right now. So in the case of Cambium, is it why people would buy from you or work for you or partner with you, invest in with you, or maybe there's another aspect that's really important?
Yeah, it's a great part. Obviously, we are interested in all of those, so don't hesitate, listeners, if you want to do any of those. We open door. But I think what we're really focused on right now, and is something that is part of the next stage of our growth, is thinking about why somebody would work for us. It's a question we ask a lot, and I think part of it is it's an interesting question because it's very dynamic, right? When you think about startups, you have to re-earn your position at every new stage. We're entering a new phase in our business. What that means is that the roles are evolving and the whys are evolving. Who we are hiring is evolving. The resources we have to hire them is evolving. And ultimately, interrogating that question of why you would work for us is also evolving. So what we've been thinking about a lot is that we've done a lot of the foundational work. So we're sort of moving out of the phase of we need to come up with an idea and show that it's got some potential, which is great. Not that there's not more for us to do there, but we're starting to get out of that. And now we're at this phase where we need people who have really been there, done it, in whatever their sort of expertise is, and want to come work in a place where they can see and take that experience and manifest it. And I think the thing that I've been thinking about a lot there, for me, all of this it's a creative act. Creating a company is a very physical, visceral act of creation. And we're really looking for people who are excited about that in their next phase. We're not interested in folks who are, trying to just check a box or move into something. We're interested in people who have sort of a deep, very, very centered connection into creativity. And I think when you find that alignment, people are very excited about coming in and working with us.
Mm-hmm. So there are lots of companies that focus on various aspects of creation from wood. Why would somebody come work for Cambium versus any other company that's working with wood? This is sort of a trick question because there's a very specific and fascinating answer.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how you would answer it. What I would say is The biggest reason is that we are operating at a very different scale from anybody in the salvage space. If you care about doing something with the waste stream, creating a circular economy, and you want to do it big, we're really the spot to come and do that. And then if you want to create a gigantic climate impact in a way that you can do quickly, and this is something that differentiates us from a lot of other climate solutions, is we don't have to go create the market. There's already $215 billion of wood in the US every year. We just have to plug into it. We don't have to go create the infrastructure. We already know how to process wood. We do have to transform the system, the incentives, and the business model. So it's a different type of challenge. And so I think part of that answer is you can come and make an impact really quickly at a scale that you can't in other places within the wood industry. But I want to know what you would say.
Well, I appreciate you asking that question. And I probably should do more of that on the podcast. I've been thinking about that. So here's the thing. People who love wood, and I've had a lot of people in my life who love wood, they have a hard time throwing it away. I mean, the ones who really love wood, and really that's what your company is all about at its core, Ben. Uh, Even if you don't do woodworking, you've never had a sliver in your life, uh, you understand that by replanting trees, wood is renewable. The difference is, Cambium, you understand that wood is also reclaimable. So that fallen log, that wood that somebody else might, as you said earlier in the episode, be burned or thrown away, doesn't have to be. And the beauty of that is the wood is not only saved and put to good use, but it has this tremendous impact on the world by reducing carbon emissions and the carbon footprint, right? So to me, the story why people would work for you is they not only want to demonstrate that wood is renewable, but that it's reclaimable. And you're one of the few places in the world where that can be done. I'm not really aware of many companies that are focused on the aspect of reclamation that you are.
Yeah, there's definitely some who are doing it in lots of different ways.
Great.
It's a growing industry, but they have sort of a different scope. We're really trying to do it from sort of the bottom up and also the top down. And so I think that changes it. And yeah, I really like the shifting in and focusing on reclaimable. And I think you're getting to the core of it. And as a son of a carpenter who's got a garage that has never had a car in it because there's so much wood.
See, this is what I'm talking about, Ben.
It's true. It's very, very real.
I've had family members who were older and into woodworking, and when they had to downsize, you try and go through that garage and say, this is left over from that XYZ project, and they're like, don't throw that away. That's a magnificent piece of cherry.
Yeah, we call it, it'll be perfect for itis. You've got that,
right.
Whatever it is, you just know at some point that'll be perfect for something.
Something, right? Yeah, yeah. And that's what's great about your company, Cambium. You folks have figured out how to not only reclaim that wood, but to put it to a use where it'll be seen as well as reused. I think a lot of other companies that claim to be reclaiming wood, it's going places where nobody's ever going to see it or realize that it's made a sustainable contribution, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big part of what differentiates us as a company is that
Absolutely.
the wood industry doesn't have a brand. There's no brand association. There's no storytelling. It's just wood is wood. It's the species. It's how it's finished.
Mm-hmm.
No connection to the brand. And you look at any other industry, there's brands, and there's a reason for that because consumers connect with them and because it provides and creates very real value. And so we're really the first trying to bring that to the industry at scale.
Well, folks, you'll also get a link to Ben's company website. I want to say, Ben, your website is all about story, our stories about people would call them case studies maybe in another industry. You're calling them stories about successes you've had. How does your personal story play out in your venture? How does Ben's story as the son of a carpenter and growing up around wood factor into the story you tell about Cambium?
Yeah, It's all very, very connected. Definitely grew up in wood. My dad was a carpenter, and my family is just very wood centric. My grandfather owned a furniture factory in North Carolina. My cousin works in fire science at the U.S. Forest Service in wood, focused on the Forest Products Laboratory. My uncle is a woodworker. It's everywhere. Close your eyes and throw a rock at the Christensen household, and you're going to hit a woodworker. So it's all around. And I think the other half of it too is my mom, as well. As she was a scientist. She's a hydrologist who really is very focused on water in the American West, New Mexico, and droughts, and all of that is very connected to climate change. And so for me, it's kind of this really beautiful, connection to both of them. Whenever I'm in the shop, I feel very connected to my dad and think about how much time I spent in there with him. And then whenever I'm thinking about more of an analytical climate problem, I feel very connected to my mom through that as well. So I feel just unbelievably grateful almost all the time to get to connect with them in that way.
That is really an awesome take on that, Ben. Obviously, our listeners understand that you have a passion for wood and your company is different. We talked about WordWrite's definition of story and why we think it's important. Why is storytelling important to you? What's your definition of storytelling and why it's important to you?
I think one of the biggest things that we think about as a company is that ultimately we are about physical storytelling. And fundamentally, we have sort of this weird, it doesn't make sense to me, this weird fascination with sameness as a society. Like we've just gone to mass production to make everything as similar and as lame as possible. And there's all these pockets where we realize, no, actually what we want is we want something unique. And what is something unique? It's something that has a story. And that's fundamentally what we're doing, is that instead of getting a piece of material that you're never going to know where it came from, you're never going to care about it, you're never going to take extra care for it because you have an attachment to it, to transforming that into a model where its story. And that fundamentally, if you have access to that, if you feel connected to that, you value space, you value the physical world differently. And that's the core premise of our company is really to transform that.
That's great, Ben. I really appreciate that, you sharing that take. Folks, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to be right back and talk a lot more about Cambium and its great story here on Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe.
Thanks, folks. We're back with Ben Christensen, the CEO and co-founder of Cambium and of Forbes 30 Under 30. Ben, I can't imagine how I forgot to mention that. Before we dig into the company and how it got started and what you folks are working on today, tell our audience a little bit about that Forbes 30 Under 30.
Yeah, I mean, it's like any award. It's great. You appreciate it. You're really, really grateful. And, I think it's really important for me. And this is something that I've been on a deeper sort of lifelong emotional journey. And I think I'm in a much more evolved place here, is to not optimize for results or awards like that.
Yes.
You optimize for execution. And so really grateful and honored to be on lists like that and some of the others that we've won. But also to me, it's really about, can we execute and can we have and run a great process every single day as an individual and as a company? So that ends up being where I get most excited, but it's always really great to be recognized, and it helps a lot.
Well, humility is something that's great, whether you're talking about a wood expert or somebody else. So thanks for sharing that. So Cambium, how do you help people and the businesses or organizations that you serve? What would you consider to be the core of your value proposition?
Yeah. So we really think about it in two big ways. So we
Mm.
think about the value we create for people who buy wood. So those are the people who are actively building a new building, are running a company that uses it like a furniture company. What we do for them is we give them access to a much more sustainable material with a brand that they can pass on to their customers, that their customers will care about at competitive pricing. So you don't have to change on price. And you also get the storytelling of it all being local, right? And so people end up caring about that in a big way. And then the last part of that is really important, and we see on our clients more and more, is they want transparency. They want traceability within their supply chain. So we offer that to them in a big way. And then the sort of next step in the process, if you go backwards, we also really support the processors. So these are the people who are salvaging the material, who are doing the milling, who are doing the drying, who are doing the finishing and the fabrication. We help them by accessing large partners, by accessing big, large buyers. We also have built out technology to really serve their needs in the shop with inventory management, moving material and getting it online, and then ultimately tracking the impact data throughout their process as well. And then the first step is actually sourcing the material. So we really support arborist and tree care services by helping them utilize material instead of wasting it, by giving them places to take it where it could be reused instead of thrown away. And then we also really help cities, states, and counties think about, all right, we're thinking more from a larger agency perspective. What happens to our trees when they die? And we help them think that through and do it in a much better way.
Yeah, we're recording this during the time of the year when we're coming out of winter, and I was thinking about recording this episode, Ben, and I'm looking at all these hillsides without any tree cover because it's winter, and all these fallen logs everywhere. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I know some of those need to be there in order to create natural regeneration for the forest, but boy, some of those could be purposely reused, right?
Yeah, 100%. And there's definitely a significant portion of material that should be left on site for, supporting the ecosystem, supporting soil health, supporting sort of nutrient cycling within the forests. But also a lot of it is already being taken off site and put on a landfill or wasted in other ways. And so that's, our main focus and where we're trying to target sourcing our material from.
Yeah, I always think about the in suburban America, the tree services, and they always have a chipper or a grinder, and they're just taking all that wood and just, I guess that hurts for somebody who cares about wood, right?
Think about how long it took to sort of create this material and how quick we are to destroy it.
Yeah, if a storm takes down a 70-year-old tree, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, this is mind-blowing. Now, you said a couple of things that I think our audience would be interested in. I know I am. One is that your work is local. The wood is local. How does that work? Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, the wood industry is massive. It's a huge global industry. In the US, we end up sourcing a good bit of wood from the US, but we also import tons and tons of wood. And we also do a lot of things where we will ship material far across an ocean and ship it back. So a good example is we're working with a company in Pennsylvania, actually, who was cutting down trees in Pennsylvania, shipping them to Italy to get processed, and then shipping them back. And we said, hey, we could just do that for you in Philadelphia and then ship it to sort of your end store.
Yeah.
And so that completely transforms the amount of shipping that needs to be done, which is great for the planet. And then it also really invests in American manufacturing. And that's one of the big things we're very focused on is how do we bring back jobs and the infrastructure in the US to actually process this material? And how do we do that in a way that is the next generation of it, which to me means making that much more equitable, focusing on workforce development, creating access to those jobs for really sustainable amounts of time. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do there.
That's fascinating. The other thing you mentioned was technology. And you folks have, I think it's called Trace.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not spelled, folks, Trace. It's spelled slightly differently for a reason, I'm sure, Ben. Can you enlighten us?
Yeah, so it's actually Danish for tree. So tying
Oh,
into I have Danish roots, if you will, and we were tying into that. And obviously, the whole goal of it is to create transparency around the life cycle of a tree. And so you trace it throughout the entire system. And the domain was also available at the time, which is always a factor in the naming process.
you see, folks, did you catch that? That's very smart storytelling, which, by the way, I'm sure some of you are wondering what Cambium means. It's a great company name. Ben, enlighten the audience. What is that? Why'd you pick that name for the company?
Yeah. So if you can picture a tree ring, sort of the classic, you've cut a log open and you see the rings. Each of those rings is a growth layer. So it represents first growing during the growing season and then less but more dense growth during winters. Each of those layers is the cambium layer.
Hmm.
So the outer layer of the tree is actually the growth layer, and then the inner layers are not actually facilitating growth anymore. So trees kind of grow on the outside and get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the cambium layer is all about growth, and it's all about connecting across scales. So the cambium layer is the growth layer, and it also houses the water, the nutrients that move from the leaves to the roots and from the roots to the leaves. And so what it really does is it's a connector that connects across scales. And that's who we really see ourselves as a company. Is we're focused on growth. We're really focusing on growing and creating impact by, expanding our business and our impact. And then we're also very focused on connecting. So we work at the national, the global scale. We just won a World Economic Forum prize. And
Yes.
then we also are very focused at the hyper local scale, down to the single tree in a city, working with local producers and trying to do all of that seamlessly.
Okay. You mentioned your World Economic Forum Prize. So now you have to explain to the audience how it was that you got that award.
Yeah, we are just starting to see more and more recognition for this opportunity in the sense that saving wood has the opportunity to be over a gigaton solution globally. What is a gigaton? It's basically the threshold for truly scalable climate solutions. And so big opportunity there. It's one that is fairly overlooked. And yeah, I think we're just starting to feel really lucky and very excited that, the climate community and some of these other folks are starting to see this is something that is deployable quickly.
Well, congratulations on that. I think that's awesome, Ben. We always like to ask leaders that we have on the podcast what gives them the greatest satisfaction in what they're doing. And I think our audience can tell that you're passionate about what you do. But what would you define as your greatest moment or moments of satisfaction in your role?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is that and I'm not perfect at this, none of us are, but more and more I find my satisfaction in purely in process, like feeling as if we won in all of the small ways, in a very
Mhm.
holistic sense, consistently. And I think the biggest part of that is that we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but when you're sort of only putting satisfaction in an endpoint
Yes.
and reach that thing, and you either did it or you didn't, and it'll either feel great or bad, and then you're on to the next thing. And this is something I've learned from ultra running and from spending lots of time, running very long 100-mile races, is that it's not about focusing on the end, it's about focusing on process. And if you do that, then you can actually be winning all the time. And you've got so many more opportunities to actually feel the satisfaction and the joy of the small pieces. And so that's what really brings me the most satisfaction, is when me or somebody on the team is having these little moments where we're doing it and doing it really well. That's sort of at the highest and best level that we can.
That's awesome. Love that, Ben. Really do. Didn't realize you were an ultra runner. Wow, 100-mile races. That's a big deal, my friend. Very cool.
It is. My co-founder and I, we run them together. So we
Ah,
get a lot of work done while we're on the trail as well.
I don't know many people who can talk and run at the same time, but I guess the pace is a little bit different. You're not trying to break a world record for a marathon in 2 hours or something like that.
No, this is much more sort of 24-hour plus. You're going really slow, which is great.
Cool. That's very interesting. I love that. Can you share with us to kind of bring all this to life, um, a client success story or a project you worked on that you feel epitomizes what's possible?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited about our partnership with Room and Board. So really large, awesome national furniture company. They use lots and lots of wood currently, and we're helping them start to use more and more reclaimed and salvaged material. So we're actually helping them source wood from walnut orchards. So when you think about the trees that grow walnuts that we all eat,
Mm-hmm.
they have relatively short lifespans and they're relatively short trees. They're just not that tall. And so when they get to the end of their life, what we do right now with them in our country is we put them in burn piles and we light them on fire in the field. And then we go and we plant new ones. And so there's this huge amount of waste there. We've been working with a bunch of different walnut farmers in Northern California, connecting them into local sawmilling partners who are then connecting those into Room and Board's manufacturing, who then are ultimately bringing this material to market. And it's a really cool example of one of our first full sort of life cycle, a full turn of the wheel, if you will, of our model. And they've been a really great partner for us.
That's awesome, Ben. Thanks for sharing that story. I'm never going to look at a walnut tree the same way anymore. By the way, it's a wood that a lot of people like, right? They like walnuts, so you can do some fun things with that. That's awesome. Ben, what's the best way for people to reach you and your company?
Yeah. So you can find us at carbonsmart.com. So pretty easy, carbonsmart.com. You can always reach out to me directly. I'm on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. So Ben Christensen, Cambium Carbon, you'll find me. I respond to all of my DMs. So if you ever want to talk, have ideas, or want to get connected with our company, please do reach out.
That's great. Ben, it's been awesome to have you on Storylines Live. Thank you so much. Folks, you'll find all the links in the show notes. I not only want to thank you, Ben, for being here today, but I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us for this episode of Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, the one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. Your capital S story. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.